There we go. Nothing but professionals. You gotta hold the button down. Hold it down until the green light.
Okay, wait. Yeah.
Oh, we are pros. We're pros at this. I can't even. We're pros. Amazing.
Mess up the audio.
It's fantastic. You know
Okay,
what?
It's good. It's good.
It's great. It's great. Now it's happening. It's fine. No one's watching it. Hey, this is the what are we doing here? This is
the new comic
the
stream.
new comic book preview stream. All the books that come out on Wednesday, we're going to talk about quite a few of them today.
Yes, there's actually a lot.
There's actually a lot. So I feel like this is. No, it's got to go this way.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's go. There you go. A little bit that way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the window to be right, but I can never get it right. Like, you see how it's all crooked right there? But anyway, that's a window. We're here to talk about comic books. What do we got? Let's talk about
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with this week. So
at the beginning.
we're going to start at the beginning. Just a reminder, there's this comic here that I've been talking about a lot called The Amoral Stingray.
Yeah.
This is my comic.
Yeah.
I wrote it.
Yeah.
Art by my friend Chris McJunkin. It is on Kickstarter right now. Swing into the store to get this free preview and go to Kickstarter. You can pre-order a copy of it. It should be out in a few months.
You could walk out. I got a question about this.
Okay.
What do you call this little comic book here?
So this, I've been calling it an ash can.
Why is it called an ash can?
That's just an industry term for preview.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember the origin of it. I think it was just the idea was that it was cheap, something that you could give out and it could just be like discarded or thrown away, like in an ash can maybe. I just made that up. You can put your cigarettes out.
And so, okay, I had a customer ask me today because we gave one to a customer. We're like, hey, check this out because they wanted a certain book. We're like, well, have you heard of Immoral Stingray? He hadn't, but he does now.
Aha.
We explained the Kickstarter, and Jacob called this an ash can. Ash tray.
An ash tray.
And I said, no, it's not ash tray, it's ash can. And the guy said, well, why is it called ash can? And I said, probably because it's like small and kind of easy to, and you could just, if you're smoking, you don't care about it that much.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to say that we don't care about your book, but like,
No, you're correct.
In general, it's just kind of like a cool throwaway thing. But I mean, this is a really cool, and I wouldn't throw it away if I was you.
It's a collector's item now. This is what we call it these days. Collector's items.
I noticed you got the shirt on.
I do. Like, I'm
Immoral
here. I'm
Stingray
advertising myself.
Shirt. I mean, you got to.
I'm a walking billboard. Yeah, we all know Susie ain't gonna do it.
No, she's not great at it.
No.
She's not watching right now.
She's not even on the stream.
All right, what else we got?
Let's move on to some actual stuff. So,
ash can.
I like to always highlight whenever those facsimile books come out, and here we are.
Is that another facsimile?
Facsimile Giant Size X-Men #1 from 1975.
Nice.
This is the. It's not the first X-Men comic. That would be X-Men #1 from 1960, 63 or 4-ish. But this is from 1975. This is kind of the real start of the X-Men as we know it. Because the X-Men famously was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And then it went about 60 issues and then got canceled in like the mid-60s, in the late 60s. Yeah, it wasn't a big selling book, not like the Avengers or Fantastic Four or Spider-Man.
Sure.
But so then the book was just printing reprints for like almost 10 years. And then they finally, in 75, they were like, maybe we should do something with that property.
Yeah.
Let's restart it.
People like X-Men.
And so this was a big leap forward for the X-Men. The idea behind it was they wanted to create a more international team to appeal to to appeal to like an international market because the Marvel Comics was growing at this time, and so that's why you have characters like Colossus, who's from Russia, Nightcrawler, who's from Germany, Wolverine, who's from Canada. Canada represents.
Oh, yeah, he's Canadian.
Yeah, he's Canadian. So there was a Storm from Africa. I don't think they even specify where in Africa.
Yeah.
You know,
generally
the country of Africa.
Just generally Africa.
And so it's a great comic. It's written by Len Wein, art by Dave Cockrum, who's kind of my favorite X-Men artist, and that's sacrilege to say around some people because they prefer the David Byrne or Jim Lee, But
I'm a David Byrne guy.
Yeah, you would be. Yeah, you would be. But yeah, no, this is an awesome comic. It's one of my favorites. I'm a huge fan of the X-Men, and so I'm really excited to get a nice 68 big pages reprint of this book.
That's a
So
lot of pages.
it's a good comic. It's worth checking out if you've never read it before, just to kind of get that. You know, I love the old
nostalgias.
reprints, not just the nostalgia, but like the origins of a lot of these legacy characters and these legacy books that have been around forever. And I kind of feel like with a lot of current comics and comic readers, like new readers, there's not as much of a connection to the older stuff. I feel like the connection is more with like just greater pop culture, like film and video games.
Sure.
And a lot of people don't really have a connection to the older comics, the original comics. So I'm really glad that they're doing these facsimile reprints because they're an easy and quick way to kind of take a peek at it without buying like a giant hardcover that just collects everything.
Yeah.
You know.
Get the old school vibe.
Yeah.
For not a lot of cash.
So speaking of facsimile reprints, DC has also come out with a reprint of Wonder Woman #1. Now, of course, this isn't the actual Wonder Woman #1. This is the reboot of the series from, I think, 1987. This is the famous run by George Perez. And I have not really read a lot of Wonder Woman, and I haven't read the George Perez run, so I'm really excited to get this this facsimile reprint so I can just pick it up and read it.
Yeah.
Again, it's a low commitment. Like, I don't have to feel like I'm buying a giant trade that collects 25 issues. I can just get this one issue and read it and kind of check it out and see where I want to go from there. And as I have said before multiple times, I think DC has a leg up on Marvel when it comes to their reprints, the quality, the paper quality, just the overall.
Oh, because it's
the
that,
book. Yeah, it's like
it's not glossy. It's
exactly.
Like actual
it's
sort
not,
of pulp.
It's
Newsprint.
more like newsprint.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's really really good stuff. My friend was showing me. I think a few weeks ago we talked about the first appearance of Doom Patrol on that they did a facsimile. It was like My Greatest Adventure #1 something from like 1964. And a friend of mine has an original copy of that that's in really good condition. And we were comparing the original copy to the facsimile.
Yeah.
And the facsimile really did look exactly like his original copy.
Okay.
Like, you could not tell the difference between the two, except that the DC facsimiles all have a barcode.
Oh.
So,
yeah.
like, but it's like, I could actually see somebody seeing these older DC facsimiles and honestly thinking that it's the
like
original
legit
one.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, guess what I found?
Exactly. And you
Oh,
always,
we're gonna be rich.
I always hear tragic stories, tragic stories about that, where somebody's like, "Oh my God, I got a CGC graded 9.8 of Walking Dead
jeez.
#1."
Yeah.
But it's like a reprint, you know, and they don't realize it, and it's worth just nothing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's so
Amazing.
sad. But anyway, so let's move on to some other books that are coming out. First, I just want to highlight a few books that I love that I haven't had a chance to read through yet.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Sunshine Patriots. I talked about the first issue
Yeah, I
a month or
remember
so ago when it came out. This is by Howard Chaykin, one of the possibly the greatest artists working in the comic book industry right now. Looks beautiful. I talked about how excellent he is at facial expressions. Like, his characters are really, really expressive. So yeah, I haven't read this one yet. Super excited. It's a 2-issue series, so this is the end of it. Check it out if you haven't read it yet. Another book that I've been reading that I haven't had a chance to look at yet, Arcade Kings #4. We talked about this one a few times on the stream as it's come out. This is a fun one if you like video games, fighting games. This is pretty much just all. Look at that, beautiful punching action.
Yeah.
It's like a kung fu movie mixed with fighting video games. So it's like the story is kind of told in the vein of a kung fu film, or a classic kung fu action, but with a lot of video game designs and tropes. Like, the characters actually play video games in the comic, and then they also kung fu fight with each other. So there's layers to it. Yeah.
Meta.
But yeah, it's cool stuff.
That's good.
Another book I'm really excited about,
Weird
Science. These are the EC Archives. This is volume 2 of
That's a fat
Weird
book.
Science. So this is a nice big book. I like that. So this is what from the golden age of comics. You've heard me talk a lot about the Silver Age. That's from the late 50s into the 60s. Golden Age is the inception of the industry, 1938. Well, a little bit earlier. But Superman really kind of like marks the beginning of the golden age in 1938, which that's when comic sales really started booming. And EC Comics was one of the best-selling comic book companies of the time. They did Weird Science. They did a lot of crime books, a lot of horror, science fiction. Because at the time, superheroes were just one genre of many. And actually, the best-selling genres was like crime and horror. And pretty much like superheroes, except for Superman, they did well, but they weren't the dominant thing the way
Yeah,
they are
yeah.
today. And so this is a beautiful cover by Wally Wood, one of my favorite artists. Just want to get you to see that in there. Look at that. Look at those aliens, green space aliens, jet fighters fighting aliens.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
awesome.
You'll have that.
So this is just cool, classic science fiction. A lot of the great golden age artists working on this. Really, really good stuff. I like that it's reprinted at the kind of the bigger size because comic books, as I've talked about before, comic books used to be bigger than they are now, and so that's why this book is printed kind of at the real size that it would have been like. So
Actual scale.
Yeah, yeah.
True scale.
So it's right now. It seems like it's the best way to read these classic comics. So
Yeah.
really excited about that. Now, before we move on to this, let's talk about an even bigger comic if you're
talk about a big one.
prepared.
I'm prepared.
So.
Maybe.
This came out a few weeks ago. You want to talk about big comics? Let's talk about the artist edition for Frank Miller's Daredevil. Now, I love these artist edition books. Now, I know that not everybody's probably seen them before, so I want to kind of flip through it just a little bit. So these books are printed, if you can, I'm just like hiding behind the book
Right,
here.
yeah, it's massive.
These books are printed at the original size that the pages are drawn. So we can't even get like the whole scope in the frame of
Get
this
the whole
shot.
thing in there.
But so it's just beautiful. Like it's high-res scans of the original pages, and so it looks like you're looking at the actual page. I want to get a little bit more light on there. So it's going to be really, really hard to see on here. But I just want to highlight it. If you're really into art and you want to really study like classic, great comic art, this is Frank Miller's work when he was on Daredevil, and this is when he really came into his own and became a really great artist. Because before Daredevil, he was actually not that great of an artist. I think the great Neil Adams even told him to just give up and stop trying to work in the industry. And well, it worked because it really made him buckle down and study and get good, and he did. And this is where he really perfected his like Marvel Comics style of art. And then he would go on to evolve and develop as an artist with books like Sin City and 300.
Let's hold it up this way and see.
Yeah.
Here you go. All right, ready? Open
Oh yeah,
open
yeah,
the
yeah.
book.
Okay,
Open
here we
the
go.
book to
Look
a
at that.
page.
Oh yeah.
It's impossible.
There we go, yeah.
Hey, look at that.
Oh,
So this is the actual scale that things were drawn, and they were just kind of shrunk down. For
yes.
print. That's
Yes,
really cool.
exactly. So you really get a sense of just like the detail that they were putting into the page.
Yeah.
That's kind of the story of comic book art as it evolved over time. It evolved with like the technological advances of the industry. So art could only be so fine because you would lose so much of it in the scaling down and the
Shrinking.
printing process. So that's
Shrinking
why
process.
a lot of like Jack Kirby's classic art, it uses a lot of heavy blacks and just like solid colors.
Yeah.
Because that's
It looks
just what
good at
really
every
works.
scale, yeah.
Exactly. It looks good at every scale. Exactly. So there's a lot of artists that are really good that draw beautiful giant pages, but then when it kind of shrinks down, you lose a lot of
Lose
that
it.
detail, and
Yeah.
it just looks kind of plain or simple.
So that in itself is a skill of like sort of understanding how it's going to scale and it'll look.
Exactly. And so that was something that Frank Miller was very conscious of, that he was developing as he evolved his style through the 80s with the upgrade in technology. And that was something that like the Image Comics guys, I talk about these glossy pages in the reprints, but that was a thing in the 90s. They switched to the glossy pages because they could do better printing and print more detail on the pages than you would on the newsprint.
Yeah.
So that's why the industry kind of switched over to that in general, which I like for newer stuff when the art is designed for it. But like when I look at the facsimile reprints and it's like the older, like simpler art, it just looks weird on the fancy glossy paper that's made to
It's
hold
not really
detail.
made for that.
Yeah, so that's I'm just pedantic about stuff like that. So
I mean, it's fine. We're doing a stream about comic books. This is the time to be pedantic.
yeah, I guess so. So this next book is actually not one that came out this week. I missed it originally when it came out last week. This is Jean Grey. I go back and forth with the X-Men. You heard me gushing about giant size X-Men facts. I love old X-Men.
Old school X-Men.
Newer X-Men, I have a love-hate relationship with it. So I haven't been following a lot of the current stuff because there's just stuff that I don't like about it, and I don't really have to go into detail here. But I saw that this issue was written by Louise Simonson, and she is a legend in the X-Men the history of the X-Men.
Okay.
She was a writer and editor. She's been working for Marvel for a long time. She was a writer and editor, at least in the 80s. She's married to Walt Simonson, who is an amazing writer and artist who had a long run on Thor. They're the original comics power couple. So I really liked her writing. She did work on Uncanny X-Men in the 80s with Chris Claremont. She was like an editor on the book. She edited and wrote New Mutants and X-Factor. She's just been involved in a lot of it at the kind of the core. Like I said, Giant Size X-Men was kind of the real new beginning for X-Men, and that set the tone, and she was involved in a lot of it from early on. So I feel like she really, really gets the X-Men in a way that maybe newer creators don't. And I say that with a little bit of like, that's just my old man bias, like, you know. But so this story,
old man bias.
You know, this story deals with the fallout. It's called Fall of X. It's part of the Fall of X like crossover. It's not really a crossover, but it's just a banner that they're putting these books under. And so this is a 4-issue series about Jean Grey, and it's dealing with the aftermath of the Hellfire Gala, which happened some weeks back, and it was kind of a big turning point in the plot, like the ongoing plot for the X-Men.
Yeah.
And so what I like about this book, first of all, is that you don't really have to know anything about that to appreciate this story, because it's all told in the past. So it's all told in the like 60s continuity for the X-Men. And without going into too much detail, there was this thing that happened with the X-Men where the original 5 characters, Cyclops, Iceman, Jean Grey, Beast, and Iceman. I said Iceman twice. Angel. The original X-Men as teenagers, like when they would have appeared in the original X-Men one from 1964, they got time traveled to the present day, and they went on adventures. But don't worry, it doesn't affect the past continuity, because eventually they go back to their real time, and their memories are wiped, and they can't remember it all.
They don't know
So
what
it's
happened.
so it's all just like they're referred to as the time-displaced X-Men team. And so this story is about them going back to their original time. So it's original X-Men continuity with their like teenagers at the school. Professor X is in charge. He's like the headmaster. But Jean Grey is so powerful that she's able to prevent their memories from being wiped. So they have knowledge of the future.
No,
And
that's
so
not good.
no, it's not good,
You
because
don't want that knowledge of the future.
because basically Jean takes it on herself. They know that she eventually becomes the Phoenix. They know that she eventually dies. They know that she eventually comes back to life. They know that she dies again. They know that she comes back to life again.
Spoilers, wow.
Yeah, spoilers all over the place in this comic. But so it's basically it's a pretty standard moral question, moral story, like power corrupting. And so with the knowledge of the future, if they have these powers and they have this knowledge, what should they do with it? So Jean kind of splinters off from the X-Men. They leave the mansion, and they decide to go on and save the world the way they think it needs to be done. And it's, it's like, I don't want to say it's like the most profound thing I've ever read, but compared to a lot of the current X-Men comics, which I feel kind of gloss over a lot of the morality of the situation, this is like biblical levels of philosophy about morality.
Oh, dang.
I really liked it. Like I said, it's written by Louise Simonson. She gets the X-Men. It doesn't hurt that it's kind of set in older continuity moments, so there is a little bit of that nostalgia bait where I'm like, this is the scene where they fight the Sentinels, but now they know about what's going to happen. So how are they going to handle that? And it's pretty good, I gotta say. It had a lot going against it. I don't like the time-displaced X-Men. I don't like the
Despite the
Hellfire
odds,
Gala. Yes,
you
exactly.
enjoyed it,
Like
okay.
despite my current ambivalence toward a lot of the current X-Men stuff, Louise Simonson, she really made it work, and I enjoyed it just as a standalone issue of just a good kind of character study of Jean Grey. And like I said, there's some solid, a little bit of philosophy in there, which I think is kind of core to the X-Men and what they're about. The morality of human relationships and power, and it's good. I was
good.
I was surprised, I gotta say, but I mean I shouldn't be
After
surprised.
all that, he says it's good.
It's
so
good.
That's
It's good.
great.
I shouldn't be surprised because it's Louise Simonson.
Right? Yeah.
But
consider the source.
Consider the source, exactly. So let's move on to some actual new books that come out this week. I want to talk about some new stuff. So one of our employees said, "This looks like a book you will really like." It was Jacob said. He goes, "Did you look at Plot Holes? It looks like something you would like." and I saw Sean Murphy's name, and I said, I love Sean Murphy. I'm gonna love this.
What do we know about Sean Murphy?
So he's done a lot of books. He's done some cool Batman stuff. He's done a lot of work with Grant Morrison. I really like the book Joe the Barbarian that he did with Grant Morrison. He did the Batman White Knight series. I believe that was. I haven't read that one. I haven't read a lot of his Batman stuff, but I like his more self-published Image stuff that he's done.
Okay.
So he's a really, really, really great artist. And this is written and drawn by him. The books that he writes, I will say he's more of, he's definitely writing like an artist, where he's an idea guy. Like, there's a lot of big ideas, and sometimes the plot can be hard to follow. So the setup for this is such a high concept setup.
I love it.
All the main characters, they are fictional characters from unpublished books or comics.
Okay.
And they exist. Yeah, right. I know, right there. So you have this character here. His name is Johnny Manga, and he's from a manga book. This little character here, Kevin, looks suspiciously like Calvin and Hobbes, which is like my favorite comic ever. This character here is named Roar. He's from a fantasy novel, like shape-shifting fantasy. And there's some other characters as well, but those are the three that stand out right there. And basically, the plot is they are an organization. They're a team called the Plot Holes, and new novels show up in their little
In
base
their reality
in their
or
reality,
whatever, yeah.
and they have to go into the novels and correct all the bad writing and plot holes
Wow.
in the novels.
Okay,
Otherwise,
okay.
they won't be published. So they go on this mission, and
That is a big idea.
yeah, it is a huge idea.
Hey, Serena.
So it starts off with this scene where they're in this science fiction novel and they're just criticizing it.
Yeah.
The spaceship looks like it's from an Ed Wood movie, the little gray aliens that's been done a million times, and so they just murder all the aliens.
Wow.
And any novel that they can't save to get published, they have to destroy. So because if it doesn't exist, then it won't exist to be unpublished or to be
Gotcha.
not published.
Yeah, it makes
and
sense.
there's like a MacGuffin setup where if too many books don't get published, then they will cease to exist. Like their reality will be destroyed, and so it's very meta.
It is meta, yeah.
And I have I'm kind of like, meta is a hard sell for me now because it's kind of, I think meta is overdone to a certain degree. Like everybody's meta now. Like people watch a Deadpool movie and they're like, oh, fourth wall.
Yeah,
We all act like it's the greatest thing in the world. So I admit, I kind of went into this and I had a little bit of an eye roll where I'm like, oh, Sean Murphy, you're doing the most,
the meta thing.
the meta thing, and it's the most artistically indulgent meta thing because you get to draw characters that are blatant homages to books and stuff that you like. Like I said, Calvin and Hobbes is in the book, but it worked pretty well for me. I enjoyed it. It looks great. It's funny. There's the point of view character is, you want to talk about meta. Here's the point of view character. He's a failed indie artist.
Wow.
So if that didn't make me uncomfortably,
You felt
I
called
felt
out
a little,
somehow?
yeah, I felt a little connection where I'm like, I should probably appreciate this character, but I kind of hate him. And but he's good. He's kind of a schmuck,
Sure.
But the fun thing is all the characters do exist in their reality, so they're real to themselves, but everybody else is fictional, but now they all exist. It's a whole.
There's a whole thing going
It's a whole thing, but I think what won me over was when they get to these pages where they're talking to Johnny Manga, and he's the comic book creator is like, "What's your deal? You're from a manga?" And he explains that it goes into manga style.
That's amazing.
He goes full manga with it, and he explains that he comes from a reality where giant robots had to defend Earth from alien invasions, and they were driven by samurais who practiced the ancient art of drifting in cars. So they're in these muscle cars drifting around inside a robot so they can pilot it. And it's the most ridiculous thing. It actually reminded me of an episode of one of my favorite cartoons, Regular Show.
Oh my god.
Just so ridiculous and over the top. And I thought, okay, Sean, you're having a lot of fun with this.
Insanity.
It's a little indulgent, but
that is flipping
the
cool.
fun,
yeah.
it's flipping cool, exactly. The fun factor just puts it over the top.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
of course the manga guy, he's super serious about the whole thing.
Right.
He's like, that's reality. That's where I come from. That's
Yeah,
me. And the other guy's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No wonder
Right.
you weren't published. And then there's all this self-esteem drawn into it. It's like, oh, we all come from failed books,
Yeah,
that kind
wow.
of suck. Yeah. Oh, it's
Samurais, Gundams, cars. What more do you need?
Right.
I mean, I want to read that book.
so I highly, highly recommend this. There's some amazing variant covers. So that's the main cover. These are all the covers are references to something. So like here, like I talked about the Calvin and Hobbes
Wow.
thing, like full on with the logo and the wagon, and here's another variant cover. Do you remember what video game this is?
Oh, I don't.
Ooh, it came out. It was on the Sega Genesis, as you can see.
Yeah, it's got that look.
It was comics. I've already forgotten. Comics something. I wanted to play this game so bad when I was a kid, and I never. Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. I wanted to play this game so bad, but we had a regular Nintendo.
Oh boy.
And not a Sega Genesis.
Lame.
We weren't cool enough to get a Sega. So I remember a friend got it, and I was like, one day at school, I was like, hey, can I Comic Zone? That's
Comic
it.
Zone, nice.
Yeah. And I was like, hey
Serena.
man, do you like to play video games? You want to maybe come over and bring your Sega Genesis
Yeah,
and some
bring it
video
over,
games?
buddy.
I'll play video games with you. And it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Did you ever get to play Comic
I
Zone?
did eventually
Let's
get to
talk about
play it.
that.
I did eventually get to play it. Yeah, it's the same.
How was it? How was the game? Now I need to know.
So I love it because it's just a beat 'em up, and I love beat 'em
Yeah.
up games.
And it's like in comic
But
books.
it's in so this game. It's if you want to keep talking about meta. This
Yeah.
game was a comic book creator gets sucked into his comic book, and he
Uh-huh.
has to fight his way out. So all the villains are
Wow.
like the villains that he created. It's literally a comic book page, so you have
Yeah.
to punch through the panels that block your path.
I have never
You've
heard.
never
of this.
heard of this?
I have
Oh.
never heard of this game.
Oh my gosh!
You guys know I'm not one for the video games too much, so I didn't play a lot of video games growing up.
Yes.
I think I mean, we're about the same age, so
Mhm.
we have the same games, but I just never had consoles. I never really got into them. So I missed out on a lot of those, but I could see why someone that loves comics would be interested in comics.
Yes.
It makes sense.
So Serena's gonna send
I'll
you a
send
clip.
you a clip. Yeah, send me a clip, like him moving across the panels, beating him up with a comic book. That's
Yep.
wild.
And then there was
Never heard of
it
that.
was all themed in comic book stuff.
Yeah.
So it was stuff could get on the page.
Yeah.
And it was.
Like if you're a comic book guy, you just automatically know about this
I,
game.
you know what? You
Is it
probably
like-
have to, but I don't want to be too judgmental if
It's
you don't.
like required, required
I
knowledge.
will confess there's maybe a certain age limit to where
Yeah.
if you're a comic book guy under the age of 30, you might not know, unless
Yeah.
you're really into retro gaming. And even then, I don't think it was a tremendously popular game of
Yeah.
its time. It was just very niche. There's a lot of crossover between comic
Yeah.
books and video games of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Shout out to the artist who designed that page.
For real, yeah. So yeah, there's the little Calvin character also
Just
on
hanging
that
out
one.
on top with
So
his
I
MP5.
honestly have a problem. I don't know which cover I'm gonna get because
Yeah.
like I said, Calvin and Hobbes is my favorite comic strip. So I'm a little bit of a sucker when it comes to him
Sure.
putting Calvin in the book. But I also this game was such a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Because it was. I don't want to talk too much about
Oh,
you gotta put you in the right frame of mind. You see, when I was a kid,
Yeah.
back then, comics were not cool. Even though they were extremely popular, they were becoming extremely popular. They still were not cool. Video games were cool, but comic books
Right.
weren't cool.
Yeah,
If you
I
read
understand.
comics, you were a nerd. And so I was very, very excited to see comics represented
In a video game.
in something else. It's the
Yeah, that
reason I
makes
became
sense.
obsessed with Kevin Smith movies and Mallrats because the main character collected comic books.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Stan Lee's in the movie, So yeah, this was a very big deal for me as a kid where I was just finally, comics have made it. They're in a video game.
We've arrived.
Yeah, we've arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Excellent.
that's all I have to say about that.
Love it.
So another excellent book that I read this week.
Hey.
I've talked about this. My favorite
Local
book, Local Man. Now,
Look at that
man,
cover.
keeping
that
the theme
metallic.
with the retro '90s old guy
Uh-huh.
books. Just a brief reminder of Local Man. It's a story set in the present day. The character used to be on a superhero team in the '90s, and he had it's a flip book, and the backside, the
Oh.
flip is always the story set in the '90s when he was in his bad '90s costume.
Yeah,
And it looks like an Image comic from like 1992,
Yeah.
93. It's all done in that style. This is a standalone issue. So issue 5 was the previous issue. This is called Local Man Gold, which was a thing. They do these special issues that they used to do back in the day because they were never on schedule. And they were so far behind all the time. And so they would put out these like specials to like hold over, like because the like issue 6 is so far beyond past due date.
Yeah.
So they kind of put something together. But this is a good story. It's a standalone. It's about multi-dimensional stuff, kind of in line
we
with.
like the multi-dimensional stuff.
There's a lot of characters that show up in this that I honestly did not expect. And one of the things that I liked about Local Man is that it's set in the Image universe, so there's always these sly references to the other Image books, even books that are no longer specifically a part of the Image universe anymore, because it's set in that time.
Right,
So they
yeah.
make reference to Youngblood, which is no longer part of the Image universe. They've made reference to Spawn and Wildcats, and this issue is kind of a big deal because there's time travel involved. So the main character in the present day meets his past self from 1993,
Nice.
or there's no hard date, like they don't say 93 because
Yeah.
that would imply like a 40-year difference between the two, and I think it's supposed to be more like a 20-year difference, but the tone, the style of it is going for the 90s.
Yeah.
And there's time travel, and a bunch of other familiar characters show up. Familiar, maybe not familiar, depending on how much you know about older comics. But like, there's this character Boof from he's a Todd McFarlane character. Dynamo 5, Stryker, Street Angel, one of the coolest, more recent Image comics by Jim Rugg, a cartoonist that I really like. Fire Breather by Phil Hester. Yeah, so like all of these are characters from other Image books. A lot of them from the 90s. Like the Street Angel is more of a 2000s character, but it's really cool to see her show up. I really wasn't expecting it. Like, So like they're actually going full on with the Image thing.
They
They're
went
just
all the way in.
they're just having the older characters show. These aren't the main characters. Like these aren't like Spawn isn't in the book yet.
Right.
You know, but there is a Todd McFarlane character, and it's even drawn in the style of Todd McFarlane. Like they're doing their best. Tony Fleeks and Tim Seeley, they're doing their best to kind of replicate the style. I think Stryker was Mark Silvestri, Jim Rugg style, like Phil Hester style for Fire Breather. So it's just a really cool book. Like if you like, again, I've been on this whole episode's kind of been about superhero stuff. But if you like, if they're kind of all around you if you're going to a comic book store. But I want to point out the stuff that like. There's the standard Marvel and DC stuff, which I don't talk about a lot of it on this show. Honestly, I try to pick out the more interesting examples of the genre.
Yeah.
And this is definitely one of the most interesting examples. Even though, as I said, it's still kind of rooted in a lot of like classic comic book history. Like the stuff that they're referencing at the time would have been pretty mainstream kind of things. Like you would have seen, I mean, like Spawn was all over the place. Like all these comics were just the hottest thing back in 92, but now they're kind of retro and nobody really remembers them. So it's a great book. It's kind of there's I didn't even talk about a bunch of Golden Age public domain characters show up because so here we go. There's some I didn't necessarily mean to spoil that big reveal, but I guess I just did. So if you watched it for those few seconds, you might have seen a lot of other characters you recognize from other Image books. There's there's an old school Robert Kirkman character before Watchmen and Invincible. He did a book, and that character shows up. There's a book from one of my favorite comics, Michael Fifa's Copra, which was briefly an Image comic for like a year.
Interesting.
He self-published, and then he went to Image, and then he was like, nah, I'm going to keep just self-published it myself. But that character shows up just because it's indie crossover.
Because you can do it.
You can do it. I mean, all the creators, they own their characters, and they just can give permission. And that's the cool thing about working with indie creators is you don't have to go through armies of lawyers. And so that's why you're never going to see like Marvel and DC crossovers again like you used to back in the 90s, is because now they're both owned by, mega corporations, Disney and Warner Brothers. And like they're just not going to compromise on anything. They're enemies. So it's nice seeing like these like indie level creators that are just like, yeah, put my character in your book. That'd be awesome. And but yeah, there's a bunch of Golden Age characters too that are in the public domain. They're kind of the villains, so that was a fun.
That's cool.
That was a fun. Like I referenced the Golden Age earlier. You know,
Someone's
characters
gonna
from
go
the
back
40s.
and pause it and see everything.
They probably will, but if it makes you go out and buy the book, I hope that's what it does. Because this probably my favorite book that's come out this week.
Nice.
I love Local Man, and this book is just cool. Like if you're a huge comic book nerd and you like weird stuff that's kind of outside of the standard Marvel and DC like boring superhero stuff, it does not get better than Local Man. So that's all I got to say about that. We have one other book. I always ask a coworker to pick something out, and our dear friend Abby, she told me to read North's Swimsuit Edition.
Okay.
So this is kind of fun. So again, I feel like I'm referencing the '90s a lot. This was a thing.
It was a great time.
It was a good time. Yeah, the Golden Age, the real Golden Age, not like the '40s. So there was. I remember I have a soft spot for swimsuit editions because I was a young prepubescent boy when I read the X-Men swimsuit edition, and Jim Lee drew a lot of ladies in string bikinis, and I just really liked it. In a way that I didn't quite understand. It was just cool, and like
It's all good.
it was like hairy Wolverine in like a Speedo, like eating a hot dog. Like it's fun.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I was immediately drawn. I was like, okay, I'll definitely read a swimsuits edition. And so Gnort, he's a Green Lantern character who's like an alien dog, like a Wookiee type thing.
Sure.
And so this is the joke is like, he can't go swimming. His hair's gonna get all wet, and he's blow drying it, and that's a fun cover. This is a one shot. It's a mix of variant covers that DC has put out over the last couple of years that involve swimsuits, and then a couple of short stories. So there's one that involves the birds of prey fighting the penguin on a beach, and then there's some more variant covers. There's that awesome Nightwing. Look at that! Like this is why people like Nightwing.
That's well done.
Let me tell you. I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me. But yeah, there's. Just like some fun variant covers, and then there's another short story. I'm not going to show you the pinup. I'm not going to spoil that. You got to get the book if you want to see the pinup.
We're not going to spoil it.
Yeah, I'm done spoiling for today. There's another short story about Moon Knight and Apollo, which is still weird to me seeing them in a DC book because they were characters that were owned by Wildstorm, which was Jim Lee's sub-imprint of Image when he created Image back in the 90s. And they were the chief competitor of DC at the time, Image. So this is why Image all fell apart. It was a beautiful dream that they had for a few years. And then eventually Jim Lee sold everything he owned to DC, and he got that sweet publisher job, corporate job at DC. Not saying he made the wrong decision. It was, in the long run, probably the absolutely correct decision. But as a result of that, now we have these two characters who were analogs of Batman and Superman, except they were gay. That was the whole thing. It was kind of taking the old joke of, like, when you look at older Superman and Batman comics, like World's Finest, where they're like best friends, and people are like, looks kind of gay.
Yeah, like, and how close friends are they?
Yeah, how close the friends are they? They're super best friends.
Right.
And so this is Moonlight, or Moon. That's not Moon Knight. It's Midnighter. Midnighter and Apollo were that. They were just like, okay, let's just take Superman, but they're in a loving, romantic relationship, and that's just their thing. They're just gay.
That's what they're doing.
And so it's weird to me to see them in a DC comic now, where they were an Image book. They were characters that were analogs of Batman and Superman, and now they're just in a book that has Batman and Superman in it, fighting Doom Patrol villains. It's a nice story. It looks good, and it's fun. The tone of this whole issue is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's just, I still kind of like can't get used to that as an older reader who used to read not DC books.
Yeah.
Like I have, I have the Authority and Stormwatch and the Midnighter and Apollo series. I read them because I didn't want to read DC books. I wanted to read cool stuff.
Yeah.
And now they're DC. So yeah, so be it.
Eventually they get you.
They do. But I enjoyed the issue. It's fun, and if you didn't get all those variant covers, because like one thing with DC that they do is their variant covers are like always $1 more than their regular covers.
Oh, interesting.
Now they're on nice cardstock. I'm not saying it's not worth $1, and a lot of times they're nice images too.
Yeah.
But this is a nice way to just like you could just get if you like to admire the art, they're in this issue. If you like to admire the art. So that's, on that note,
I can't take anything serious around here. That's the kind of guy I am.
nor should you.
Well, I mean, we're looking at a dog guy.
You were
like,
blow drying himself in a
himself,
locker room
Am I
with a naked Batman.
Am I supposed to be serious about
Yeah,
this?
exactly. But
Excellent
yeah, good
work.
good book, good pick to Abby.
This is
I
fun.
knew she knew what I like, and
There you go.
that's swimsuits.
There you go. Sold.
Yeah.
There you go. Well,
All
that's a Tuesday comic book preview for tomorrow.
Yeah.
We did it.
We
There's
did it.
A lot of great books, a lot of superhero books.
Yes, that's like mostly what stood out to me this week.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to look through the entire wall, so you know what? It's very possible that next week
You're
I'm going
have
to come
some
back
from
with a
this
book
week.
from this week, just like I did with Jean Grey,
Yeah, I think
where I'm
that's
like,
fine.
oh yeah, I think so too.
People might have missed something.
As long as we have it to sell.
We're doing a service.
That's right.
And if you don't buy your comic books here, Fantasy Books and Games, find somewhere that sells comic books near you. You can buy some stuff. Go and check it out. It's not just all superheroes. Despite what we showed you today, you're going to find something you like, so make sure you check it out.
Yeah.
And we'll see everybody next Tuesday for more books.
Yeah.